all, thanks for the introduction, Mr. President. That was very kind of you. And so as you said, James Young Geddes, admirable former president who sadly slipped into a bit of obscurity. Hopefully tonight we can keep his memory alive somewhat. I'll echo what I'm trying to put across to you all tonight is what the D.C. Thompson poetry critic said of his first collection in Jerusalem. He said, "I like that. I feel it is written by a man who would be worth knowing." I'm trying to put across to you that James Young Geddes is a poet that's certainly worth knowing. I mentioned in the advertisement for this talk that Geddes actually penned a poem about his time as president of Dundee Burns Club. Sadly, because of limited access to the university archives right now, I've only been able to access poems from his last collection. But I do have here a few lines that he penned in tribute to Dundee Burns Club. I'd like to use those to start us off. As a member of the Dundee Burns Club, Mr. Geddes recalls with great zest the glowing spirits who used to meet of nights. Each one moved as if he had meant to put his whole wit in a jest and resolved to live a fool the rest of his dull life. And there we are. But this collection in the Valhalla, which we do have 2 copies of in our Burns Club library, does contain 2 immortal memories that Geddes delivered at the Alyth Burns Club a few years after his presidency of this establishment. And I'd like to open us up with a reading from one of those. Because this is a very underknown, undervalued poet, this will probably be quite recitation heavy, so preparing you now. We'll be reading a fair few poems here. But this is his Memory of Burns, delivered at the Alyth Burns Club anniversary concert, January the 25th, 1890. Again we hail his natal day, the sovereign minstrel, patriot bard, and gather here to greet his sway with tokens of renewed regard. With kinsmen meeting everywhere to own his undiminished power, we too would in their fervour share and spend a genial social hour. Shall we but give with ecstasy the homage of some fulsome words, and shall his songs and carols be the transient rapture of the birds, brief interludes in lives of care, borne onward by the passing wind, to melt into the viewless air and leave no influence behind. Nay, let them be as flashing swords, a heroes from their scabbards drawn, incisive, stirring, urging words, words to actions dare dawn. So by his dauntless spirit taught, we may his independence reach, and dare to give to free-born thought brave utterance and manly speech. Nor stand appalled with craven lips when tyranny and modern guise would freedom's broadening sun eclipse by the bold blackness of our lies. Have we the men of Strathmore lacked his courage in these days of change, we by the burly Grampians backed and shielded by the Siglaw range, we who may trace the Isla's course from trickling life and infant dream to where she leaps with Celtic force through gorges to her tranquil stream, where sluggish Dean with slow disdain abets her in her lingering pride, till rapid Eric joins the twain to urge the Tay's reluctant bride. Shall we love Scotland less than he, we who survey her fairest plain? Shall our aspiring mountains be nature's satire on skulking men? Go seek thy country's fairest scenes, and find them to thy footsteps barred. Her streams, her dales, her peaks, ravines, the stranger's hireling minions guard. Go mark in every highland glen the ruined homesteads of our sons, that race of stalwart, sturdy men, exiled by pleasure's myrmidons. Think but that Scotland heard him sing a wild, despairing farewell note, and caught her songster on the wing. His too had been the outcast's lot. Then show thy reverence for the bard, thy reverence for his country's cause, and aid the sage his land to guard from pressure of unequal laws. Till to the stall and marketplace the swarming hucksters backward thrown shall cease to traffic in our grace, and Scotland's beauty be our own. Till Scotland's peasantry restored, his kindred ploughers of the soil shall find again on Scottish sward a recompense for honest toil. Be ours his love of lowly worth, ours his contempt of empty pride, the lords that lean upon their birth, the sustenance of deeds denied. And so may every Scotchman thrive, in life that low endeavour spurns, to guard thy fame and keep alive, immortally thy memory burns. Lovely little tribute there. So, what to know about Geddes? He was born in Dundee in 1850, spent much of his early years in Alyth, and much of his twilight years in Alyth also. But he was considered to be, and even though he was as intimate with the Barrowman and Cooperangus, Causeway End, Campmuir, Kettins, Montrose and Burlington, as he was with the streets and alleys of Dundee, it's evident, however, that both in thought and action, our friend is a son of the city, a product of its stirring life and ceaseless activities. And the majority of his pieces bear the impress of a mind concerned with its labour conditions and its class antagonisms. It's an interesting story, Geddes' sort of early stirrings as a poet. He came to prominence as the president of the Tay Square United Presbyterian Church Literary Society. Quite a mouthful there. But then there was a schism, a controversy within the church that led to the beginnings of Geddes' career as an orator, as a public critic. Essentially, the Reverend of the Tay Square United Presbyterian Church, a Dr. McGavin, was considered to be somewhat orthodox and stringently conservative in his ministry. And this came to a head when the Edinburgh United Presbyterian Church had tried to accuse George Gilfillan, the famous proprietor, supporter of poets such as McGonagall and Surface Man, White Man, of heresy. And this was only 2 times that, from what I can gather, in Scottish religious history where a church from another city had got involved in the affairs of another. This is the second to do so, so while this was a very active, controversial debate going on in the press at the time, they were referring to the fact that a schism had previously occurred with Perth and Stirling UPs, but this one, because of Gilfillan's literary credibility as a celebrity, seemed to be quite big news at the time. So, Gilfillan, quite a legend, a friend of Thomas de Quincey and all the sort of movers and shakers of the literary environment of the day. And he was accused of heresy off the back of, this was in 1870, and they actually had to go all the way back to 1839 to find the heretical quotations that he was accused of. And he didn't really say anything too extreme, What we've got here is, this is from the Scotsman article that he wrote in 1839. I feel also, in common with many in the United Presbyterian Church, that our present standards contain much dubious matter, and a good deal besides about which there can be no doubt at all begotten false and mischievous. In a later work, Modern Christian Heroes, he wrote, our standards are seen now to contain many blunders, blunders of scriptural interpretation, blunders of natural and mental philosophy, blunders of theological doctrine, such dogmas as eternal reprobation and the damnation of non-elect infants. They hold that the world was made in 6 literal days. And these 3 comments are what embroiled the church in controversy at the time. We felt for years past our presbytery, and especially a prominent member in it, have been under a watchful and secret espionage. So there's this sense that the Edinburgh Church had been watching Gilfillan for a long time, trying to get him for something. And this was really the fervent that Geddes came out of, because he, as president of the Tay Square Literary Society, he came into direct contact with McGavin, and whose rigid Calvinistic theology and strict orthodoxy, Geddes's freedom of thought and speech, were particularly obnoxious. The result was open revolt on the part of Geddes. And this is really the background to Geddes's first collection, The New Jerusalem, which deals in a very sort of direct, somewhat controversial manner with these sort of religious disputes. Sadly, I would read from this collection, but I wasn't able to access it in time for tonight's talk. It's got some truly incredible poems. The New Jerusalem itself, the title poem, features the speaker dying and passing on to heaven, which he finds to be too bureaucratic and bourgeois, and he elects to go to hell instead. The hell, the new inferno, is clearly modelled on a sort of urban, demotic Dundee. And that brings me back to, you mentioned the McDermott's disparaging comments about Dundee at the start there, but my favourite of which is that he said that Dundee was like a 10th circle of hell that Dante could never have imagined. So we're here seeing a more positive treatment of Dundee as hell. It also features the Second Advent, a poem about the rebirth of Christ, the Second Coming, in which the close-minded town council of the poem re-crucify the Messiah. So very edgy material for the period. And it all was born out of this real experience that Geddes had face to face with a sort of extremely conservative Christianity. The second collection, The Spectre Clock of Alyth, another one I've not been able to access ahead of tonight, but one that looks more to Strathmore and his native surroundings and deals with the stagnation and neglect that Alyth and the broader region were enduring at the time. And it's really in this local focus in Alyth and Strathmore that we see Geddes turn from being a public orator and a poet to being a more of a political figure. And in the picture that was shared ahead of tonight, Bailey Geddes, he did rise to be the Bailey in Alyth, and also did a great deal of political campaigning, which led to the formation of a Working Men's Municipal Party, also a radical association in the region that later folded into the Liberal Association. So as well as being a passionate poet, this was a political figure, very prominent. One thing I really like about Geddes is that he's a great example of a sort of reciprocal cultural exchange or cultural mobility, because what you see is, in 1795, as Burns passes away, Fanny Wright is born in Dundee, into a background of fervent radical action. Her father was a radical. In the 1790s was the time that George Mealmaker and the Friends of Liberty, later the United Scotsmen, she's born out of this environment, then she goes over to America, does this amazing tour of lectures, and in the crowd at these lectures is a 17-year-old Walt Whitman. Whitman said of Fanny Wright, "She was a brilliant woman, of beauty and estate, who was never satisfied unless she was busy doing good. Public good, private good. We all loved her, fell down before her. Her very appearance seemed to enthrall us. The noblest Roman of them all. A woman of the noblest make-up, whose orbit was a great deal larger than theirs, too large to be tolerated for long by them. A most maligned, lied-about character, one of the best in history, but one of the least understood." And then you have the exchange where Walt Whitman's verse comes across the Atlantic and inspires the young James Young Geddes in his poetic form. And that's really what, on a formal level, jumps out when you look at Geddes' work, is his use of free verse and the influence of Whitman and Emerson. Emerson, of course, also spoke in Dundee at one point and met with the Reverend Thomas Dick. So there's some really interesting intersections here between Dundee's own radicalism and that of the burgeoning Americas. He was also very much involved in the Reekie Lynn affair, which was a prominent controversy in the Alyth region in the period. A petition for interdict has been presented in the Sheriff Court of Forfar against James Young Geddes, Taylor, James Milligan, Druggist, and Alexander Mackenzie, Baker, all of Alyth, to prohibit them from entering the estate Craig Islet, property of William Nicol, trespassing by visiting the Reekie Lynn. And this is really interesting. This right of way case would prove to be capture the hearts and minds of the people at the time. And this is something that's actually came into relief again during the lockdown. Reekie Lynn became a very popular spot for people in Dundee wanting to get a wee day out. And once again, there was a lot of controversy with neighbouring farmlands and the accusations of trespassing. So this is very relevant stuff. Beautiful waterfall, if anyone's never been. And they actually managed to get a huge swelling of public support for this right of way case, to the point where they actually managed to get a huge assemblage on the Sabbath in Reekie Lynn. So you had this great audience turn out on the Sabbath day to the waterfall to sort of make a statement on a public right of access.
Did they win?
They did.
That's the main thing.
That's the main thing. Yeah, and it's really interesting because, you know, the other thing about Geddes, he was the Alyth correspondent for the Dundee Advertiser for many years. He also wrote columns in the London Sun, the London Star. But it can be quite tricky accessing some of this writing by him, because if you search his name on the British Newspaper Archive, for example, you get about 10 pages of Reekie Lynn controversy. This is, you know, right at the heart of his legacy, which is quite amazing. But that brings me to his final collection in the Valhalla, which is the only book of his that we actually have a copy of in the library here too, of which is a very beautiful edition. And this is really where Geddes' most enduring poems come from this collection. And I'm going to share a few of them. So one that's commonly shared is Glendale and Company, which Graham mentioned in the introduction. And this is really, for 1891 when this was released, it's a very forward-thinking treatment of, especially in one passage which deals with a distinguished traveller from the colonies, which to me is one of the most sort of acerbic treatments of imperialism that I've come across from this time. So I'm just going to read this one passage. Glendale, I think I saw you the other day. I was at a meeting to greet a distinguished traveller. Distinguished traveller had penetrated to the heart of Africa. The natives, not acquainted with the blessings of civilization, of trade and of commerce, went naked or nearly so, lived in huts in the forest, wore rings in their noses. Unhappy, benighted natives. Natives not so anxious to receive the blessings of civilization as could be wished, opposed the progress of distinguished traveller. Some of them had to be hanged, some of them had to be shot. Actions of intrepid traveller, quite justifiable in your eyes. I saw you and others applauding him, as spoke in his own justification. It was necessary to impress on the mind of the natives the wholesomeness of discipline. Natives idolatrous, worshippers of wooden gods. Distinguished traveller of a religious turn of mind, this also highly satisfactory. In a moment of dire distress he cried unto heaven, He informed the Supreme that if he were relieved, he would mention the fact in the newspapers. Great concession this on the part of the distinguished traveller, not always inclined to share publicity with anyone. Distinguished traveller was relieved. Strictly faithful to his word, he mentioned the fact in the newspapers. For these things, for his devotion to commerce, for his courteous recognition of religion, you honoured and hurrahed him. You bestowed upon him the freedom of the town. Some days the projects and predictions of the distinguished traveller will be carried out. The native will become ashamed of his nakedness. He'll no more wear rings in his nose. He'll quit his hut in the forest. He'll give up his wooden gods. He'll become as enlightened in matters of religion as the distinguished traveller. For these things you will give the native the blessings of civilization. You will erect him slums like to those of the Overgate and the Scouring Burn. The slaver will no more carry away his children. They'll be brought up on the half-time system. He'll no longer eat his enemies. He'll consume the earnings of his children. The necessity for cheap labour, unfortunately not allowing you to employ himself. Blessings on the valour, the enterprise of the distinguished traveller. You really get a sense there of the sarcasm and the acerbic wit of Geddes, and this was something that he was commended for at the time. I have some quotations here from his reviews. An indifference to convention and much independence of spirit, which have exhibited the prickly side of his character occasionally. He has, as Le Gallienne points out, is a contemporary poet of Geddes, who lived a bit later, younger, but a fellow colleague columnist at the London Star. The saving sense of humour in his composition, which helps to tone down the acerbities of debate. Probably even his opponents would rather have him on their side. Okay, and I'm going to finish this off here before we go into a little bit of discussion with a reading of The Glory Has Departed. Because this is, to me, the most enduring Geddes poem, but also one that deals with Burns and the Dundee Burns Club in detail. And one that I think many people will recognise as a predecessor of the current and long history of a Dundonian critical culture that he celebrates here. Bear with me a second. Okay, this is quite a long one, but I think it's got real value to read it straight through. So bear with me. I'm going to try and channel and be as demotic and passionate as possible here. And Geddes' work, like Burns's, like Whitman's, really exists to be read aloud. I think it's really got that quality. The glory has departed after Walt Whitman. This is what we've come to. Here in the year of our Lord 1888, this is the effect of coquetting with dignitaries. This is the result of the Education Acts. This is the sum total of the general diffusion of culture and the spread of knowledge among the people. Hitherto we have arrived. Here where we are studying the beautiful only in its connection with the useful and the practical. Here where we were bent on abrogating the merely ornamental. Here where we are meditating the abolition of perpetual pensions and the reform of the House of Lords. Here when real men, when persons of genuine worth, refuse titles, won't have them on any account. Yes, this is where we are. Dundee's applied for the title of city and got it. The town's ablaze with its new title. Drapers have seized it, placed it in gilt letters in front of their buildings. So have the publicans, the sellers of fish and the importers of fruit, the new-made citizens. See how they strut, how they stride. See how they're knitting their brows. Their eyes are cast on the ground. They're troubled in thought. They're lost in the profoundest of speculations. Each and all of them are deeply cogitating. What are they cogitating? Questions of the deepest importance. Questions wide as the blue vault of heaven, deep as is the inferno. Who now shall be first in procession? Who at state banquets shall be seated the highest? Shall we now claim precedence at Liverpool, Glasgow, Perth? Especially Perth. Perth will be brought low. Perth will be no longer cock of the walk. Perth may no longer claim preeminence in the river. Her Lord Provost shall no longer be Admiral of the Tay. We'll bite our thumbs at Perth. We'll cluck out our tongues to her. So shall our souls be satisfied. Mine own town. Dear old town. Town with the unbroken radical history. Town that ever stood first for reform and independence. Town where Wallace declared the national freedom. Town that stood for Knox and the Reformation. Town where the tree of liberty was planted. Town where Kinloch stands menacing even yet in bronze unjust governments. Dear old town. Other men are sending thee letters of gratulation. I will send thee no letter of gratulation. I'll send thee rather a note of condolence bordered with black round the edges. Other men are planning adornments for their bodies, new robes and new dresses. I'll put on my old clothes, place a black band in my elbow and crape in my hat. I'll mourn in sackcloth and ashes, because foolishness cries in the street, because silliness has become exceedingly abundant. Toll a muffled peal for the bells. Hang flags halfway in the standards, on spires and on steeples. Hang flags half-mast in the ships that come from afar. Hang crape in the churches, on the galleries, on the pews, on the pulpits. The good old town is gone, irrevocably gone, dead, vanished. We'll weep for the brave old town. For the brave old town that emerged buoyantly again and again through wars, famine, pestilence, fires and sacking. The good old town of modesty, prudence, sincerity, earnestness, candour will follow it to its grave. You can remain if you choose, you that have destroyed and dispatched her. You can welcome in with plaudits and singing her usurper, the new city of emptiness, frivolity, humbug, pretension, fussy importance, the new city of shoddy and jute, tally in the mind of its rulers. Waken up, Carlisle, there's need of you here. This after your 30-odd volumes, this after your life search for the true, for the real. Look at my Lord Provost, look at the magistrates, councillors, all of them presumably sane, all of them at an age when most folks are done with baubles. Some of them grey-headed, grey-bearded, some of them bald-pated. They're countrymen of yours. It's a positive fact, you cannot deny it. Methinks I see your face of infinite scorn. Methinks I hear your murmur, "Feach, poor creatures," and your accent, inimitable Annandale. So long, Carlisle. I apologise for disturbing you. Here you, Burns, stargazing opposite lambs. Turn your neck this way. Never mind the lingering star for a while. Never mind your Mary in heaven, she's comfortable enough. It's we who are vexed, we who are troubled. Here's a theme for your satire. Here are the people that raise statues to you. Here are the people that sing, "A man's a man for a' that." Here are the people that shout, "The rank is but the guinea stamp." See how they're craning their necks for honours. See how avaricious they are for gewgaws, how their souls are athirst for trumpery titles. No, you won't look, you won't listen. Well, perhaps after all, you're better employed. Methinks if you were alive, you'd leap for your pedestal and flee from the city. A bell tolls. 'Tis the clock for the steeple, proclaiming the hour. The old steeple. Take it away too. It'll feel out of place in your new city. Place in its room some of your newfangled gingerbread architecture. Look at it, my Lord Provost, magistrates, councillors. Is it not a standing reproach to you, there with its head midst the stars, cringing to no one for honours, majestical, dignified? Such, my Lord Provost, magistrates, councillors, such should have been your attitude. Such was the attitude of the old town. Inherently great in itself, no one by any possibility could make it any greater. It needed no recognition from royalty. Royalty ought to have been glad that the town recognised it. My Lord Provost, magistrates, councillors, if what you've done had only involved yourself, it would have been a matter of no consequence. You've indelibly disgraced the town. You that would have exalted her have brought her exceedingly low. She's become a byword and reproach. She is as a crow that daubs itself white and is pecked by her neighbours. The small villages are smiling. They poke fun at her. The large towns are holding their fat sides. They're bursting with laughter. And for you, my Lord Provost, magistrates, councillors, Zacchaeus was not a whit taller, though he climbed up a tree. He added not an inch to his stature. He remained as little as ever. Neither are you any greater, my municipal Zacchaeuses. You have climbed to what you think an elevated position. You've only made your littleness more conspicuous. You now ask the world, the universe, to gaze at your smallness of mind, to inspect your undersized souls. Yet, my Lord Provost, magistrates, councillors, perhaps this is hard on you. Perhaps you did not know any better. Perhaps you acted as you did with the best intentions. Perhaps you don't know what are matters of importance and what are not matters of importance. My Lord Provost, whether you're called Lord Provost, Shah, Great Lama, or Big Panjin Drim, that's a matter of no importance. Whether you take precedence of Perth, or Perth takes precedence of you, that also is as nothing. To go to state banquets, to be noticed by Her Majesty, these also are the veriest trifles. What are things of importance? To be the chief magistrate in a town of independent men, to be careless of honours, to be careful only to be honourable, to keep your town clean, to see that your townsmen are not overpressed with poverty, to see that the industrious are encouraged, that the wicked also receive their deserts. See to these, my Lord Provost, magistrates and councillors, and you'll be great. Neglect these, and the Queen cannot make you great, though she showered titles on you thick as the snows of winter. What a farce it is! There's a mob outside, my Lord Provost. A mob of grim, unhealthy, stunted, dirty-looking persons. Where do you come from, mob? We come from the slums of the town. What do you want, mob? Air, health, homes, better surroundings, protection from jerry builders and rapacious landlords. Get away, mob. My Lord Provost is busy. He's immersed in studying an affair of the greatest importance. He's engaged with a tailor, ordering his new robes. Can't we see the Baileys? No. Get away, mob. They too are busy. They too are immersed in studying an affair of the greatest importance. They are assisting the tailor. Ishabod. Very powerful, very funny, and a really interesting poem, one that's still got a lot of relevance today, I think, as we see our new generation of changes in the city. And we fight our own impulses to decry them. But I'd like to just finish off on a note, and this is where I'd like the discussion to sort of go. You know, this is, I'm by no means a Geddes expert, I'm just a fan, because he vindicates my own grumpiness at times. But, you know, I'm joining in here in a chorus of literary scholars of days gone by who said, this is a man that's worth knowing, and a man that should be restored to the public memory of Dundee. I think the Burns Club's is in a good position to lead the charge, in a sense. His work's long been unavailable. The New Jerusalem was out of print within a year of its publication. There only exists one copy that I know of in the whole of the city. Same with the second collection. This one slightly more. But there's a lot of work to be done to sort of raise the profile of Geddes. I feel like all of his work's in the public domain. Maybe a new edition of his work would be a good place to start. But also, as you can see, his poems, you know, they exist to be read aloud. They're very dramatic, and I think that's also a good way to get the ball rolling, restoring the memory of this great poet and president of the Dundee Burns Club. So I welcome your suggestions and your ideas. And thanks all.